Yes. That's fine, yeah, just.
Is Senator Innes here today?
I have not seen him.
On that very
But we are not going to wait. So with that, we will call the Senate Finance Committee to order. And the first bill is House Bill 122, and last prime sponsor up to introduce the bill. Go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate the time. For the record, I'm Jim Creighton, representative for Hillsborough District 30 out of Antrim. I introduced HB 122 at the request of the National Guard Bureau. Essentially what the bill says is that if a National Guard troop or vehicle causes damage in some way, that the Guard Bureau would be authorized to reimburse the individual. For example, if a truck hit a mailbox and the mailbox costs less than $500 today, National Guard Bureau writes them a check, pays for the mailbox. That was last updated over 25 years ago, and much of the damage is more than $500. So what the Bureau is asking is that if there is damage, that they be authorized to compensate the citizens of New Hampshire up to $1,000 per incident instead of $500. 30 years in the Army, my experience is this happens. Things go bump, and it's best if the Bureau can just fix it. Subject to your questions, that's HB 122.
Questions from the senators? Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I see that the fiscal note is de minimis, but it's subject to the appropriation for the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs. Is that general funds or federal funds or something?
Those would be the general funds. I'm 90% sure, because that's a state to state. That's all within the state.
Okay.
Thank you. Good question.
Do you have any idea how many claims, 500 or more than 500?
Very few, sir. And I don't know for the exact number, but it's under 100, I'm sure.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Kevin, I guess you're elected. He was hoping somebody else would show up and he could go after.
For the record, I was hoping that if somebody showed up from DMAS, I would let them go first, like any good staff officer would. You let the general go speak before you. For the record, I am Kevin Grady. I'm a 25-year Air Force veteran, and I'm also a 28-year resident of the town of Hooksett, New Hampshire. Today, I'm representing the State Veterans Advisory Committee. I've talked to everybody in here before, so you're familiar with our work. We do support this. There's a couple other small changes in this where we're cleaning up some language. We're saying basically that where it says Department of the Adjutant General, we're changing that to Department of Military Affairs and Veteran Services to update those changes that we've made. I have a joke I like to tell my friends when they discover something we've been doing all along. Like, hey, did you know that you can pay all your bills online? I always like to tell them, welcome to the 20th century. You know, well, this bill hasn't been updated since we've been in the 21st century. As best I can tell, the statute came out in August of 1981. Back when I was a 27-year-old hair-on-fire fighter pilot flying F-15s down in Alamogordo, New Mexico. And that was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So stuff costs more now than it did then. And this really is a good deal for not just the Guard, but also for our citizens that don't have to go through a board process and a lengthy claims process for something that's $700 or $800. So we do strongly support this bill, and that's all I wanted to tell you today.
Questions from the senators? Oh, Senator Bertzel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Kevin. Is this a request from the?
This is a request from Gerald Nicolaitis' office. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
As far as I know, yes. And he was here when the testimony was given in the House. He did testify in favor of it.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Is there anyone who signed up, not on the first sheet, for this bill? Anyone that changed their mind? There is one other person who signed in support online, and with that, we will close the public hearing. Do I have a motion to go into executive session? We have a motion and a second to go into executive session. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. We are in executive session. We have a motion from Senator Birdsell to approve, seconded by Senator Rosenwald, OTP. Further discussion? All those in favor of ought to pass, say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Do we have a motion for consent?
So moved.
Senator Birdsell, seconded by Senator Rosenwald. I'm just going to keep it constant. You were close. You were close. We have a motion and a second for consent. All those in favor of consent say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. It's on consent. And Senator Birdsell gets to take this one out. And anyone have anything else they want to do in executive session? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion to come out of executive session, and we have a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. We're back in regular session, and we will start the next bill in about 3 or 4 minutes.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks.
It takes us a long time, you know.
739. HB 739 addresses an area of our taxation that is in some ways complex, in some ways controversial. The bill itself is actually very simple. What it does is it restores language that was repealed in 2011 that would require those communities that collect more in swept tax than their due and adequacy aid to remit the so-called excess to the DRA for deposit in the Education Trust Fund. The fiscal impact of that change is about $28.6 million, and it affects something approaching 30 municipalities. This doesn't change the total amount of revenue to the state, which is, of course, the $363 million. But what it does do is it adds to the cash on hand in the Education Trust Fund by that nearly $30 million figure. The committee in the House made one simple amendment at the request of the DRA and the DOE, and that was to change the cycle in which this would be implemented. The effective date comes July 1st, 25, but the implementation would be in the budget cycle for FY27, and therefore this remit requirement would kick in March 27. So that deferral is to make sure that the change didn't upset actions already underway, budgets already being built and approved in communities. I'd just like to address the motivation for all of this. As a representative of communities that struggle to support local education and pay the real property tax, Charlestown is the highest property tax community in the state. And that, of course, is due overwhelmingly to the cost of funding education. So we're at about $36.50 per thousand, and over $22 per thousand is just local ed. SWEP comes on top of that, of course. The basic issue is that, love it or hate it, the SWEP tax is law, and it has to be constitutional if it's going to be law. I'm not a fan of SWEPT. I'm actually very sympathetic with the so-called donor communities in the coalition. But the fact is that we do have the SWEPT tax. It does contribute heavily towards the state's adequacy aid. And I am in agreement, and the Education Funding Committee is in agreement, and the House Finance Committee is in agreement with the ruling of Judge Ruoff in the Rand case that the SWEPT tax, the way it's currently administered, is unconstitutional, because allowing certain communities to retain the portion that exceeds adequacy aid results in the net effect of unequal tax rates applied across the state. So this bill is one of 4 bills that were heard in the House last year, one of 4 that again have been reintroduced this year. And this is the bill that addresses the issue most simply and directly. And this is the bill that the committee got behind, supported 18-0. And it is one that cuts across party lines. But the vote on the House floor was roughly 2-1, about 2/3. Glad to take any questions.
Questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we'll go to the second sheet first, Mayor of Portsmouth, I believe. I think he's still mayor.
Still, yeah, still.
All right, well, we'll put you up first.
Thank you to the committee for having me, to the chair for welcoming me here today and for taking up this bill. My name is Daigle McCachran. I'm lucky enough to serve as the mayor of Portsmouth. And I thought just for today, I would take a different track. Obviously, I think that everybody in the state cherishes education. It's in the Constitution, and this is not a conversation about education, but it is about how we pay for it. And I thought I'd take this moment just to remind folks, and I'm sure that everybody here is versed in municipal government and understands tax rates and how they come to be and how they have the impact on the people paying them. But there's a lot of focus on tax rates here as a barometer of how wealthy people are. And I will say that here in Portsmouth, or not here in Portsmouth, we're in Concord and it's beautiful, but in Portsmouth, we just went through a revaluation. Now we did that 5 years later. We waited through COVID because of the fact that the commercial values fell off of a cliff. And we knew that if a reval would happen in the midst of that turmoil, the shift would be pushed onto the residents pretty substantially. Even waiting 5 years, we had a revaluation, and still the cost of the city's government was shifted on to the residential property because commercial did not grow nearly as quickly as the residential grew. And because of that, even though our budget went up less than 3%, people's taxes went up significantly more than that. So when we're talking about tax rates here and swept.
We need to stay to the language in the bill and
Yep.
how it affects.
Yep. So
I'm trying to give you a little chance to
yep.
get
So
some background,
I'm getting
but
I'm getting
I do
to
wanna
that.
get to the bill.
Yep. So the focus of the bill to take a blanket sweep across and say that Portsmouth, because it is a property-rich community, should share more of that with Concord and the rest of the state is going to have a couple effects. One of those, that pressure that's on our communities right now in terms of taxes, that money, and I think it's $800,000 now. If adequacy goes up, it's going to be, 1.6 million thereabouts, and that's just a start. It's going to continue to drive our budgets higher and higher because we're going to have to be replacing that money. Right now, our budget's on pace to come in lower than the state's budget in terms of increases, and yet we would have to raise that even more. Second, it's going to have an enormous effect on housing. These issues are completely related. And the fact that we're not talking about housing as part of education is a big disservice to the state in general. The fact that any additional housing would no longer remain in terms of that tax rate within the city of Portsmouth, but would be remitted to Concord, is going to have the effect of limiting the amount of housing that we will see in Portsmouth. It's hard to build every single house, affordable or not. The front page of the Herald every day is talking about this new development, that new development. We know that in Portsmouth that we can sustain development. We have the police to do it, we have the fire to do it, we have the sewage treatment plant to do it, but if the taxes that we're getting from that is then going to be sent to Concord instead of being able to stay and educate our population, it's going to be even harder to do that, and we're no longer going to be the fastest growing community in the state. Third, when we're talking about the equity around this, and there's been a lot of said that, hey, we're just going to have this flat rate applied evenly across. It's not even because communities make choices with the money that they have and the zoning that they choose to have or allow. The representative from Charlestown had mentioned that it was very difficult to raise the necessary funds, and I am sympathetic to that. But Charleston is 63% current use versus Portsmouth of less than 3%. How can we be talking about remitting money to the state when they are not even taxing more than half of their community at the rate that it should be taxed at, from a community that would be paying their full amount of taxes? Obviously, not every community is going to be able to support commercial development, but the fact that we are not taking that into account, that we have some municipalities with tax caps and others with not, it's not a good system to go back. And what we're talking about is $27 million. It's not enough to actually to solve the issue that we're facing on a state level. But it will do is really break open the system and be the first chink in the armor that's really going to start setting us back in terms of trying to solve these issues of housing, of equity, of education on the state level. And that's why we are so opposed to the passage of this bill, because we are not going to improve education funding, and we're going to take a step back in our fight against the housing crisis.
Questions from senators? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mark? Come on forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the community. My name is Mark Dakota. I'm the Waterville Valley Town Manager, and I currently chair the Education Coalition Communities 2.0, a group of 21 members, cities, and towns that have come together to ensure any future funding solution for the state aid to education does not unfairly mandate property tax money being raised in one town and sent to another, to be appropriated by way of the Department of Revenue Administration. On behalf of the member municipalities of the Education Coalition communities, I appear before you today to oppose House Bill 739. Under this bill, a property tax increase of $29 million will have to be raised by a small number of New Hampshire towns through their local education portion of their tax rates. Using these calculations, Waterville Valley would have to send $504,200 of so-called excess SWEP to the state. This represents 70% of our SWEP dollars that we currently use to educate students in our town. Alphabetically speaking, similar tax rates and increases will be seen from Alton to Wolfboro and 53 places in between. I would point out another issue that we see with this bill. Since the beginning of the last legislative session, there have been various education funding formulas and amounts per student costs considered by the legislature. In all of the proposals, the higher that the per pupil amount was, the more donor communities there are. The first plan last year had 27 communities with so-called excess SWEP dollars. Other funding plans with higher per pupil costs resulted in 40+ communities, and SB 739 establishes a formula and a per pupil amount that results, as I said, in 55 donor communities. Please keep in mind that any community that has to return excess SWEP funds will have to raise those dollars again through the local education portion of the property tax rate. Faced with these tax increases, if our towns do not want increases in their total property tax bills, then education and municipal priorities may be impacted. Our taxpayers will be forced to reassess school budgets, municipal budgets with potential negative impacts on both. This seems contrary to the intent of any increase in education funding within the state. This bill seeks to yet again establish an unfair funding scheme that the legislature repealed in 2011, and they considered and dismissed it as late as last legislative session. House Bill 739 has the same flaws as the past actions. House Bill 739 creates an unfair redistribution of property tax revenue. The failed policy has been tried before and repealed. It does nothing but create acrimony between our municipalities. There's no inherent fairness, accountability, or fiscal responsibility in this bill. The bill simply takes education property tax dollars from one community and redistributes it to other communities, thereby increasing the tax burden on some property owners here in New Hampshire. I urge you to reject this bill's fallacy of free money from what some consider as rich towns. Do we consider towns such as Bartlett or Freedom or Pittsburgh rich towns? These towns and 15 other communities below the state average of median household income donate education property tax funds under the provisions of this bill. This bill creates winners and losers across the Granite State and has the potential to negatively impact our taxpayers and municipal and school budgets in many ways. We appreciate the challenge that we have with school funding in the state. We care deeply about ensuring quality education for our children, and the coalition will continue our support for a fair and comprehensive approach for education funding in New Hampshire. Working with legislators, community leaders, and the general public, our members are confident that an appropriate resolution can be developed that does not treat towns differently or disproportionately. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions from the senators?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. Waterville Valley is a particularly interesting town. Do you know what percentage of the homeowners there live there full-time and what percentage are second homeowners?
Not percentages, Senator, but I know that there are approximately 790 full-time residents in the town. We have 1,500 properties in town, but I don't know the exact percentage.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jason?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Senators. My name is Jason Sorens. I live in Amherst, New Hampshire, which would theoretically actually be one of the recipient towns under this legislation, but I worry that the long-term consequences of this legislation could be negative for most of the state. I work at the American Institute for Economic Research, and we put in an amicus brief in support of the state in the Rand case on appeal, because we believe that the economic consequences of property tax recapture, as this bill would legislate, aren't sufficiently well known. And once we consider those consequences, we'll see that they're often quite negative. So to dig into this a little bit, first of all, I would say that the use of mill rates to assess property tax burden is misleading. Yeah.
This bill doesn't have anything to do with changing the amount of the tax. So discussions about mill rate and other things, you better find out, or better tell me how it's appropriate. But this bill talks about where I put the money.
That's right, and the prime sponsor did refer to mill rates and use that as justification for the bill. This justification doesn't make sense. When you look at actual property tax burdens, the actual property taxes paid per household in towns like Hanover and Portsmouth are over twice what they are in towns like Pittsfield and Allenstown, so-called low-capacity towns. So there's no unfairness here in the current system, where property taxes are much lower in these high-capacity towns. That's the impression that's given, but it's actually not true when you look at actual property taxes paid, because real estate is so much more expensive in towns like Hanover and Portsmouth. The mayor made a great point about the incentives for development here. So there's research from Federal Reserve economist Byron Lutz on the.
You're way out on the fringe.
Well, I
want you to get back to the bill, please, sir.
Yes. So property tax recapture, as this bill would enact, would reduce property values in donor towns.
Again, all right, we're talking about a state tax here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're saying property tax recapture. I think that's a mischaracterization. The bill says we're going to take the state tax and we're going to not let the communities keep it. We're going to bring it to the state. So that's what the bill does, and that's
right.
what you can testify to.
Yes, so I'm using the term property tax recapture for that process. We could call it something else, but it's basically the state taking some of those excess property tax funds, all of those excess property tax funds, and redistributing them to the rest of the state.
This is a state tax.
Yes.
You're saying the state taking, it is the state's money.
Certainly. So the state is assessing this tax. It's levying this tax. The state is levying this money,
Right.
and it is redistributing it to recipient towns, right? And the consequences of this are to discourage towns from developing their property tax base. Because if they develop their property tax
Can't
base.
speak to motive.
Well, this is not the motive. This is the
You
effect.
just said that the reason they're doing that, that's motive. I'm sorry, sir. The rules are right there in front of you, okay? Apparently you didn't read the rules before you came in today, all right? I want you to stick to the bill. I gave the author of the bill a little extra leeway. I gave the mayor of Portsmouth a little extra leeway, but you're supposed to be an expert on this. You guys submitted a brief, okay? So I want you to talk to the bill.
Yes. So what the bill would incentivize, this is the consequence, not the intent, it's an unintended negative consequence of the bill, would be to discourage development. Because communities would not want to develop their property tax base, because by doing so, their effective tax burden would rise, because they would have to fund what is now being taken by the state, or redistributed by the state, levied by the state. They would have to substitute with that for local funds. What we also find here, so there's peer-reviewed research finding this. Federal Reserve economist Byron Lutz did a study of New Hampshire, finding that when this was in place from 1999 to 2011, property values fell in donor towns, rose in recipient towns. Recipient towns responded by enacting growth control ordinances because they wanted to limit population growth. People were trying to move there to take advantage
Again,
of the
you
low
just
property
spoke
taxes.
to motive. You said they did this because, okay? So I don't think you've been at the bill at all. You've always been out here at the edges, okay? Right now, we have a state tax. It's levied on everybody. It's equalized. And now we're deciding who gets to keep it and who gets to send it to the state.
Yes.
Okay?
It is
So
important to
that's what
look
I want
at.
you to speak to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do believe it is important to look at the incentives, though, that this system would create to actors within the system to understand the economic consequences, and that's all I intended to
So
do.
now we're just calling motives incentives.
Well, not the motives of the legislator or the legislature, but okay. So the bill would redistribute these excess property tax funds to recipient towns, causing people to move from donor towns to recipient towns. That has the effect of both discouraging development in donor towns and causing recipient towns to want to enact growth control ordinances, according to the research. I did my own research finding this nationwide, that in metro areas where you had property tax recapture schemes like this one, you had somewhat higher land use regulation as measured by University of Pennsylvania researchers. While the dollars at stake from this bill are not huge, they will grow if the state were to raise the rate of the state education tax, which may well happen if the Conval decision is upheld. And so if that decision is upheld, we could expect that about $50 million would be at stake from this bill. And in some places, I found, for instance, in Hale's location, my calculations based on DOE data and DRA data, is that property taxes would jump essentially overnight by about 70%. So that's a pretty significant change. So in conclusion, if you want to help poor people, you shouldn't redistribute wealth from property-rich to property-poor towns, because that doesn't match up with where poor people and rich people live. The better option is to increase the multiplier for the state adequacy grant that goes toward children with free and reduced lunch. That's a way to actually help poor people. But there are perverse incentives set up if you actually punish towns for having a high property tax base. And I am willing to take questions. Thank you.
Questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much. That's the last person I have on my list. Representative, unless one of the senators wants some more information from you, you have had your shot. I think that you can do that individually. Oh, there's one more. You can do that individually to the senators afterward.
Thank you.
Paul? Is there a Paul?
Thank you for giving me the moment. My name is Paul DeShane. I'm the project manager with the town of Newington, and the Newington Board of Selectmen have sent me here explicitly to oppose this legislation. Won't repeat anything that Mark Dakota spoke to, because I'm the vice chair also of the Education Coalition Communities. So his arguments are our arguments. I'm just, again, emphasizing in the case of Newington, this is going to be a $724,000 increase in local property taxes due to this shift of cash. This is merely a cash transfer being held currently by the towns for the benefit of education.
Because I spoke to the last person, okay? This is a state tax, okay? The state is deciding where that money's gonna go, okay? So calling it a shift in tax is not correct.
No, I spoke to
please
a
stick
shift
to
in
the bill.
cash, sir. And if you let me, I think even Representative, the sponsor, Spilsberg, last year said that we have an education tax, state education tax system where it masquerades as a state tax, only when it serves the purposes of the state. But regardless of those arguments, this increase will occur year after year after year and only increase as the tax increases, for at least for the town of Newington. It finds itself only in such a situation because it's one of the many communities that have small enrollments. It's only 800 people, but with a high property tax base. That's intended that way. We have many businesses and industries in our commercial industrial zones, particularly our utility property taxpayers are still paying the $6.60 per dollar.
Back to this bill.
Yep.
I don't see anything in here about utility taxes, so.
But what
stick
I'm
to the
saying
bill.
is that when the local education property tax increases, because we have to make up this $724,000, they will have to start paying increased local education property taxes to make up that difference. So this bill has many different ramifications for our community. It really does nothing relative to the education funding program, because all it does is bring in $29 million into the education trust fund. It's not being redistributed in the same amount of per student allocations are in place. This is really just a mutual misery in local property taxation. Because there is this inequity. I recognize there's an inequity, but this is not the solution, at least in Newington's mind.
Okay. Any questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much. Do the senators have any questions for anybody who has spoken before? Okay, seeing none. The online was 1 in support, 52 opposed. And with that, we will close the public hearing unless the senators have any other business to do. And I don't see any. We are adjourned. Okay.